So you mentioned rent not being like up to scratch, like $80 a week across some of the properties that multi-investor portfolio. Rent arrears.
Yes.
That is the next major concern that people have about if I'm going to have a rental property. Yeah, will it be leased on time? Well, obviously how you do that is minimum vacancies, but then are they going to pay rent on time? And all the horror stories you hear on all the fantastic media channels that are out there.
Yeah.
Like, what should people know about that? And what is the actual, what's the information around that? Like, can you just get rid of some of the myth with that?
Yeah, so we have zero tolerance for rent arrears. And I know everybody says that, but there is a big difference between zero tolerance and a little bit of tolerance.
Explain that out. What's a little bit of tolerance?
Yeah? So the legislation is very clear as to when you can issue breaches, notices to leave, etc. So we do the absolute minimum. So once a tenant is 7 days in arrears, on the 8th day you can issue a breach. So they have to be 7 clear days behind. So on the 8th day you issue a breach.
Calendar days, business days?
Yeah, just calendar.
Just calendar days.
Yeah. And then they have 7 days to rectify that breach. And if they don't rectify that breach on the 8th day, again, you've got clear days, you can serve a notice to leave, which is 7 days. And if they don't leave, again, after those 7 days. So you're adding a day kind of gets added each time. So it's 3 weeks because it's the breach and then it's not rectifying and then it's a notice to leave and then it's not leaving. So it's about 3.5 weeks by the end of that process.
But that's only if you do it the day of, right? If you do it
those, specific days. So, and remember, bond's only 4 weeks rent, right? So you're 3.5 weeks by the time you get to the end. And then what do you do when you get to the end? You have to apply to QCAT for a warrant.
That sounds fun.
And QCAT is what every property manager does not want to do. I don't want to go to QCAT either, but it's a means to an end.
Yes.
It's the only option you have when you get to the end of that process, unless you continue to try and negotiate with the tenants. And again, this comes down to what the owner wants to do as well. Most owners will say, go to QCAT because they need to, they're already almost a month without rent and income. And who knows when the tenant is going to pay. They're obviously not paying.
Totally.
So,
yeah.
But nobody wants to do that. It's not a pleasant process. And it is probably at the moment is about another 4 weeks before you get a hearing. So you're 4 weeks in arrears, then you apply to QCAT, and it's 4 weeks before you get a hearing. And then you need to make sure everything is on point when you go there because they're not in the habit of kicking people out of homes if things aren't done correctly.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you even delay it a couple of days here and there at each side of the process. So we had an owner where this happened to, and they served the breach, they served the notice to leave, tenant didn't leave. And then,
so this is before you took over their property?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then they didn't do anything. So they didn't do the next step. They didn't go to QCAT. And that was for about 3 months that they were trying to negotiate.
3 months?
They were getting rent here and there.
Yeah.
But obviously nowhere near what was needed. Anyway, we took over and they were probably about 4 to 5 months behind in rent.
What does that equate to roughly, like ballpark?
It was...
it'd be substantial, surely.
Yeah, well, this particular property wasn't a high rent. I think it was about $600 a week. So
3,600 a month.
Whatever
8,
that
9,
adds up
well,
to.
10. So we're about 12.
Yeah,
about 12K.
About 12,000, yeah. So, and there's certain time frames that you have to lodge to QCAT. So we actually had to start the process again. So we breach. They're not 7 days behind. They're however many days it was behind.
Totally.
They don't rectify the breach, serve a notice to leave, and then we applied to QCAT. So by the time we got to QCAT, we're at 6 months rent arrears. And we got the warrant and the tenant was removed from the property. Now, this particular owner had landlord insurance, so which is great.
Oh, I do want to cover that specifically.
Yeah. So
after this, for sure.
Always have landlord insurance, but yeah, we'll get to that. We got a lot of the arrears back. However, there was probably about 3 months that the insurer said you're outside of your coverage, because they only insure up to a certain amount, and a lot of insurers will only insure up to, if you have followed that timeline of the legislation,
to the letter,
then you should get all your money back through insurance if your property manager has followed the process as per those guidelines. Because I think some insurers will only cover up to 6 weeks loss of rent, and then denial of access, which is if the tenant doesn't leave after the notice to leave and you have to go to QCAT, they cover that as well. So if you have done it all correctly, but if you're waiting longer and longer, then even with insurance, you don't get coverage.
So is this sort of comes back to what does good property management look like? And it's managing these scenarios that no one really wants to talk about, right? But hey, like at the end of the day, if an investor or someone's putting money, their own personal money, into supporting the housing economy of Australia, to buy an investment property, to one, let someone be able to rent that can't afford to buy, but also to help grow their own personal and family wealth long term, you know, it's either the person's renting is paying for that asset, or the homeowner is paying for the rent for that person to live in it.
Yeah.
It becomes a negatively geared property.
And it's understanding the consequences of the processes that we do. How is this going to affect the outcome for the owner? And so having knowledge and experience of what insurers look at and how they deal with things helps us to understand, well, we can't wait. We would love to be able to, I had another situation recently where the tenants have asked for a payment plan, but the insurer has said to us, if you do that, we won't cover you. And so it kind of forces the hand of the owner. So I guess, everyone, it's not always the owner that is making those difficult decisions for people. It's their insurance. So we can only do what we can do to protect the owner, which is not always obviously the outcome that the tenant wants.
Yeah, because you're sort of facilitating the relation. At the end of the day, a property manager is there to facilitate the relationship between the landlord and the tenant.
And in some scenarios, we can do. It's based on each individual circumstance. I've had owners that agree to payment plans with tenants, and the tenants pay religiously on that day and time. So there's confidence there that it will get done, and so there's less risk for them with their insurance or whatever it is. But then there's people that go, oh, we want a payment plan, but have never shown any interest in actually paying. So
it's sort of like a case by case, a give and take on both sides.
Yeah.